Welcome to another episode of How I Discovered My Gift with yours truly, David D. Simons. I'm honored and my excited for you to hear today's guest and the amazing things that I already know she's going to drop and the wisdom she's going to share with y'all today. So let me tell you about Emmy Hernandez. She left the corporate world as an executive to help women and couples find love, and she's now a love and relationship coach, an international speaker, workshop facilitator, author, and she works with, as I said, women and couples who are committed to co-create an epic, passionate, and fulfilling romantic partnership. She started her consulting career in the Silicon Valley tech world, where she advised startups and organizations on their marketing, branding, and product development. And from there, she noticed a need. And while she was doing this consulting role with highly driven female leaders, she noticed that they would have frustrations around the dating experience. Maybe some of you listening, this is you right now, so you need to pay attention. Attracting their future life partners or being satisfied with their existing relationships. And this conversation and these experiences that she was having were the catalyst to create this coaching business. With over a decade of psychology and neuroscience studies, Emmy's coaching practices and online courses focus on healing old wounds and self-sabotaging patterns that are preventing women from being and feeling ready for love, mastering and understanding the art of science of your love frequency. I know we got to get into that. Building a communication toolbox, empowering you to turn your petty fights into masterful conversations. So today, Emmy is helping so many to find love, and we thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you so much, Emmy.
Thank you, David, for having me here. I'm really looking forward to getting into the conversations with you. Absolutely loved the conversations we had before we started this, and I'm absolutely honored that you asked me to be here. So, thank you.
Wonderful. Appreciate you. So, Emmy, I want to take it all the way back, right? I want you to take it all the way to childhood, Emmy, right? Like, how did you become who you are today? What was it like growing up as a child?
Yeah, so we're going way back, my friend.
Oh,
Woo, we're going
yeah.
we're going way back. Childhood Emmy. See, childhood Emmy is the first person in her family to be born in the United States. So my family is from Mexico. My mom and dad have worked really hard. They came to the States after they got married, and my dad has worked in construction his entire life and built out a pretty good life for his family. And I got to be the first person to learn English in my family. So at about when I was a third or fourth grade, I started translating and interpreting for my parents and with legal documents and doctors. And eventually, I became the eldest of 7 children. So my mom and dad have 7 kids. And so it was a big household. We were always very busy. And my dad is a wonderful man of integrity, and my mom was an incredible homemaker. Very thankful to them for what they built and the sacrifices they created for us. With that also came a lot of drawbacks, right? My parents did not come from education. Neither one of them were allowed to finish 3rd grade when they were in Mexico. My dad had to start working, and my mom had to take care of her family members. So it was not an option for them. So I got to be the first person in my entire lineage of women to graduate from 3rd grade. Yeah. So imagine, we think now 3rd grade's not a big deal, right? It's kind of a requirement. Well, not only did I graduate from 3rd grade, David, I got a full ride scholarship to UC Berkeley.
Wow. And that's a prestigious school. Wow.
I didn't know that at the time, right? I knew I didn't know how to spell it. I didn't know where it was. I just knew that I had to go there. There was something that called it. You know how when you feel that calling from God, that you're just like, I know I'm supposed to do this. I wasn't sure why. Thank goodness for 17-year-old naive Emmy, who had no idea that I was broke and didn't know that I needed money for life. I just knew I wanted to go there, and thankfully I had a full ride scholarship. But I came across a lot of programming in my family, especially for my mom, right? So I understand her fear now. 17-year-old me did not understand her fear, and I was very upset. In my culture, women are not supposed to leave their home until they're married. And not only was I not married, I was underage. I graduated high school at 17 with a 4.3 GPA.
Wow.
And because I was underage, my mom was like, well, if I don't sign the paperwork, you can't go to college. And I said, and I did, this was my first misdemeanor and hopefully the only one, watch me. So I forged her signature.
Mm.
Berkeley doesn't know this, and hopefully they never find out. I took all my classes, but I ran away from home. I ran away from home.
Mm.
I begged, I pleaded with my dad to drive me to college. He did, and then my mom didn't talk to me for 3 months after I was in college. So I was disowned by the family because I decided to go to college. I'll pause there. I'll pause there for a moment.
Yeah, I mean, like, you're a generational shifter. Like, you broke through a lot of things that were like limiting, like the third grade. I mean, to go from third grader to, it's like going from a bicycle to a spaceship. You know, like
Basically.
you
Yeah.
know,
Talk about 10x quantum. Yeah.
yeah, like, and you know, I'm sure this is my assumption. I'm sure it wasn't really against you. It's probably like just oppositional forces, unfortunately used through family to stop, to try to stifle you because you're breaking and shifting so many things for your family. That's
Yeah.
profound.
Yeah. After doing a lot of work with psychology and understanding about family structures, I don't hold it against my parents at all. I think back now, and actually my mom and I had a conversation about 5 years ago, and we're talking like I graduated, high school a long time ago at this
Mhm.
point. And I was telling her, do you remember like how rough it was when I first started college, and how you were mad at me? She was like, yeah. And I told her, I was like, why were you so upset? And she finally broke down and told me, she's like, you don't understand. She's like, we could barely afford to survive the
Mm.
way that we were. I was terrified that you weren't going to have anything to eat because we couldn't send you any money, that we
Oh,
couldn't afford another household. Right. And 17-year-old version of me, not like, because my mom is such a strong mom, that was something she didn't want to put on my shoulders, which I appreciate. And because I maybe would have stayed home, David, I maybe would have and said, like, you know what, let me just get a full-time job, even though I already had one when I was in high school, and like just stay and work. So I appreciate that they didn't put that on my shoulders of like, hey, you have to stay and take care of this family, because it wasn't my responsibility. My dad was doing an amazing job, and I understand the pressure. Now they added another household. I just so happened to be so naive and so resourceful that 2 weeks after I started college, I got a full-time job on campus, and I had a full ride. So because I was so naive and so resourceful and so ambitious and so driven, like God poured his favor on me, and we never had to worry about money.
wow, wow. Like, I like, I can imagine that conversation that you had with your, like, I'm fighting my tears from when you're saying the motive behind why. Like, how did you respond to that when you heard that was her reasoning for wanting to hold you back from going to college?
David, I had a similar reaction that you're having right now, because it was hard to hear, and also it gave my heart so much peace,
Mm.
because I got to release a lot of resentment that I
Yeah.
had held for a really, really long time. For a really long time, my ego just kept telling me, "Oh, she's doing that because she's mean. She's doing that because of X, Y, and Z. She's doing that, And this is, we're not going to go into more elements around my relationship with my mother, but in this instance, she was just so terrified. And if you
Mm.
think about it, like I would have been terrified of letting my 17-year-old daughter leave as well. Remember, I didn't have access to a vehicle. We couldn't afford one.
Mm.
I didn't have a laptop. I was lucky enough that I did this debate competition for Bank of America, and they gave me $1,000. So
Mm.
with that, I bought a laptop and took it to college. So my mom, with the wisdom she had, she knew everything I was lacking, right? The resources, the financial resources I was lacking. But because I was so young and naive, I didn't know everything I was missing. all I knew was potential. And that was the greatest gift I could ever have.
Wow.
So once I understood her fear 20 years before, it released all this resentment in my heart. And I was like, I understand where she was coming from. And her fear was valid. Now, the part that really hurt me was the cultural aspect that I have been able to now have conversations with my aunts about. Not only did they fear financially for my safety and like being able to eat food, but they also feared that I was going to basically ruin the family's reputation. And what I mean by that is all the women in my family, in order for them to leave the home, they had to go marry a man, right? That's what created a new household. So I was breaking so many barriers of like how dare I, and it wasn't even dare, it's don't put yourself in that level of danger. For them, it was dangerous for me to go to college as a single woman, right? So their biggest fear, David, was that I was going to turn into a prostitute.
Really?
Yeah. They literally called my mom. My aunts all ganged up. They told her like, "How dare you? Like, you can't let her go." Like, and David, I was so innocent. I didn't even know what sex was at the time.
Mm.
Like, it was not something that
Yeah.
was even anything that I cared about. I didn't care
Yeah.
about boyfriends. I
Mhm.
I valued my education so much because I
Mm.
just loved learning. And honestly, I wasn't even planning on going to Berkeley. That was one of the many schools that let me in. But
Wow.
my teachers and my principals got together on campus because we had 4 principals at my school.
Yeah.
They had an entire meeting to and sat me down to tell me the importance of me going and accepting UC Berkeley. I
Wow.
really was like, what's the big deal? Like, it's just another one of the schools. They're like, no, you do not understand. You do not understand. Do not give up this opportunity. So if it hadn't been for my counselors and my teachers who knew the capacity within me, I don't know that I would have even gone.
Wow. What a journey. I mean, like, it's like one thing could have derailed the whole plan, right? Like, as you go through. So, take me through, right? Now you're at UC Berkeley. You're excelling, I imagine, there as well. And then you're going into, I don't know if you went straight into the corporate world. Talk to us about that transition from, like, what your experience was in college and then into Silicon.
Yes. Well, David, I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. I believe I'm going to be as honest as possible. I did not excel right away when I got into college.
Mm, gotcha.
I was in high school, I was a shark amongst guppy fish. I mean,
Mm,
I was the boss of that school. I was one of the smartest people there. It was easy. High school for me was easy, even though I took a lot of AP classes. I
mm,
graduated high school with a full semester's worth of college credits. So I
wow.
started college as like half of a sophomore already. I was
Wow.
almost sophomore year.
Wow.
So I walked in pretty arrogant, I will say. And then I was presented with, now I was the guppy fish amongst the sharks. That
Mm,
first semester was the most difficult time academically in my life because I actually didn't know how to study, David.
mm,
I things came so easily to me that when I did study, it was 15, 20 minutes before a test and I was done. That is not how I worked at Berkeley.
mm,
Those long 20-page essays, so much so that they actually sent me back to quote unquote remedial English. I had to
mm,
take extra English college credits. And for those of you who are listening to this, who you're probably already recognizing because English is my second language,
mhm.
I started recognizing, and my teachers, my professors at this point realized that I was writing my papers by translating everything in my head from Spanish to English. So I was writing everything in passive voice and passive tense, and they're like, "Why are you getting our assignments like this? Is very confusing." And until they had a little intervention and realized, "Oh, you're translating everything."
Wow.
So we had to do like a quick assessment, and because we figured that out, we were able to fast track me into the higher level English classes. But if they hadn't taken the time to understand that and instead of pushed me off to the side, I
Yeah.
probably would have had to quit that first semester, David, and not just because of them, but when the school found out I got accepted to Berkeley, and this is a school of 3,000 students, very few of us ever got to leave LA. Okay,
Mm,
in general, much less to go to a university.
right.
I had 2 teachers who tell me, One told me, Emmy, you only got accepted because your last name is Hernandez, so they're filling a quota. True story. And another teacher told me, Emmy, don't bother going because you have 2 strikes against you. You're a girl and you're Latina. The chances of you finishing college are pretty slim, so don't bother. True story.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I'm telling you this because their words were ringing in my mind when I was struggling. When I was struggling in English class, I was struggling in psychology, I was struggling in everything. And then something magical happened. I got my first semester grades. And David, for the first time in my life, I danced for joy because I got a C. I got a C all across the boards. I had never seen that letter. I didn't even know I didn't even know it existed.
Wow.
But that meant that I barely passed, and I was like, okay, good. Like, we can make it to the next semester. But now I knew the rules. I knew the rules to the game. I knew how to study. I knew what the professors wanted. I knew how to actually be a good student. And then I got my GPA just soared from there. And I had a full-time job, by the way. I got a job in marketing at the Dining Commons.
Wow.
So fast forward from college, I went straight into corporate. I was one of the few people. I graduated at the height of 2008 crash.
Oh my goodness. My fellow recession graduator, I was the same way. Oh
Yeah,
my God.
recession babies.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my goodness. Wow.
Yeah. And you know how hard it was to get a job for anybody at that time.
Hard.
Right?
Super
But
hard.
I didn't know it was hard because it was the first time I was doing it in corporate. So I landed a corporate gig with I won't say the actual company, but it's a Fortune 50 company, and I was their marketing. I started as a marketing coordinator and went into marketing directing very quickly.
Wow.
Because I didn't know what I didn't know. Within 6 months of starting with the corporation, I sold over $1 million worth of property and assets that they had deemed garbage, and I sold all of these assets on eBay. So I made, in 6 months of working with that company, I made them all that money back. It was 100% pure profit. And because I didn't know any better, 20-year-old Emmy had barely turned 21. I didn't get a penny for it, David. There's no bonus, there's no anything extra. I was just the marketing person who just happened to get good at sales.
Wow. That's crazy. And so then tell us how, because you ended up becoming an executive. I don't know if it was in the same organization or another organization, and then this is kind of like where things start to take a shift. So
Correct. Yeah. Well, fast forward from that corporate job, took a couple more. I would stay at like a corporate job like two or 3 years to gain a skill set and sort of jump into something else. Got a lot of certifications, and then I moved into, eventually Berkeley called me back now to run a different organization, to run something called Innovation Core. And this was specifically for lean startup methodology. For those of you familiar with Silicon Valley, that's a pretty major thing with Steve Blank.
Oh, yeah.
And they called me in to be the program manager for this. And eventually I got so good at it that I actually offered, hey, what if we sell this to other universities in other countries? And they were like, well, we don't know how to go about that. And I said, well, I have some connections in Mexico that we could potentially work with. So I said, I'll sell these deals, but only if I get to be the coach.
Wow.
So I negotiated a contract with Berkeley for me to be the coach. And I started teaching lean startup methodology in Spanish in Chihuahua, Mexico, multiple universities in León, Guanajuato, in Montevideo, Uruguay, and in an MBA school in Tunisia, Africa.
What? Wait a minute, Emmy. This is profound, right? Because it's like your entrepreneurial gift, like that is like such a thing that nobody does, right? Like you saw a problem, which entrepreneurs do, and you solved the problem. I don't. Do you? Did you at that time even realize that you were literally finding entrepreneurial solutions, doing entrepreneurial things within a corporation?
No, I just knew that like honestly, I pitched that because there were certain ladies in the office that didn't like how loud I was, and I didn't have my own office, so I didn't know how else to be me. So my solution to that was, well, let me still be me and go do something where I don't bother them, and that way they don't aggravate me either. So I was just trying to get out of the office, and I
Amazing.
absolutely loved my boss. I will forever. His name is Andre Marquis. He's been one of the most amazing mentors I have ever had,
Mm,
and he loved who I was. He loved working with me, and he and I would sit down. We're like, I don't understand why these other ladies in the office get so aggravated with you.
mm,
And I didn't understand it either, but I knew that wasn't going to slow me down. So I honestly pitched this out of desperation, David. It wasn't. I wish I could tell you, oh, I saw a market opportunity. No, it had nothing to do with seeing a market opportunity. It had just had to do with I didn't fit in their little realm of academia, and these other people that were in education came from academia and wanted to stay in academia, and I came from corporate, I came from sales, I came from marketing, and I also came from theater. Okay, I
mm,
was in theater all throughout high school, so I knew how to perform, and I would get a lot of attention when I did presentations, and it irked the other people in the office a little bit because we had about a 20-year age gap. So
mhm,
I just knew that I didn't want to be around their pessimism. I was
mm.
not going to let them bring me down. And it's okay if they wanted to be mad at the world, but I wasn't going to be.
Respect. That's amazing. So so now like how is this program going? Like what you were doing, imagine in your 20s doing this to impact, like the impact, what was the impact that was being made on all these students in other countries, and what was happening there? I'm just so curious about that.
Yeah. So, you know what's so happened, David? Like everyone's familiar now with Shark Tank, right? Here in the US. And I think they're
Mhm.
Dragon Dens or wherever in Canada.
Yeah.
So, because we already knew what Shark Tank was, and I was getting a lot of attention with what I was doing with the startups in Ciudad Juarez, in Chihuahua, in Mexico. Not only startups, by the way, in León, Guanajuato, I was working with corporate executives, teaching them intrapreneurship,
Mm,
how to create innovation within their teams.
mm,
So that got like it opened up so many doors for me to continue getting called in for keynotes. And like my largest keynote was in front of 10,000 people in Guadalajara, Mexico. It was a big freaking deal. That's a lot of
major,
people.
major.
Yeah. So the impact, my favorite part was getting to meet all of these students who had all these incredible ideas, who were in the markets they were trying to serve, right? So it wasn't like Joe Schmo from Ohio trying to solve something in the middle of Africa. It's like, like you have, if you're not really in the market, you're not going to see the opportunity. So these students and these entrepreneurs were in their markets, and they were bringing up things that were so local yet could be expanded to global opportunities. So what happened is, because we started doing these trainings, we started getting attraction of a lot of local VCs. So because of the work that we did, a lot of the startups got local funding from investors and VCs in Mexico and Uruguay.
What an impact. That's amazing. So then what led to, I mean, like this sounds like amazing. So I knew you transitioned. What made you transition from there? Cuz this sounds like that kind of experience and that kind of opportunity, you don't get that in an organization to be able to do that kind of stuff typically.
No, I kind of made my own organization.
Yeah.
At that point, I was working from home. So when, I understand a lot of people really struggled during COVID and everything went to home, but I've been doing this and living on Zoom and WebEx since 2016.
Mm,
I was running global teams since 2016. So I actually helped a lot of people transition in the middle of the pandemic because they're like, what do we do? And I'm like, it's okay. I got this. I've been doing this for 4 or 5 years. Like, it's okay.
wow.
It's going to be okay. So that level of transition, how I went from this corporate executive, right, to now being a love coach, is I did get a little bogged down in all of the travel. There was a lot of traveling to many different countries. And for the first 2 years, I was like, this is so much fun, right? I'm getting paid to do all this. And after a while, I was like, wait, this is actually really putting a strain on my dating
Mm,
opportunities, right? Because I was single, looking for love, looking for my husband. And not only that, it got to be a little bit too, some some of the coaches that were part of some of the other programs, they were a little too aggressive for my taste and how they like to coach the clients or the students. And
Mm-hmm.
I have a very different approach. Like, I coach and I'm firm, but I don't believe in being cruel.
Yeah,
Cruelty is not in my DNA.
for sure.
And some of the coaching tactics that were being imposed upon me, where you have to be cruel or else they won't get it. And it was very militaristic, very disciplinarian.
Yeah.
And it started getting to me. It started really bothering me. And I said, hey, this just doesn't feel right. And I need to shift out of the space.
Mm.
So what happened is I actually left it all and took a year sabbatical.
Mm.
I took a year sabbatical. I moved to Omaha, Nebraska. I know, so random, right?
Random.
So from Silicon Valley, I moved to Omaha, Nebraska because my family had moved there like a decade prior. Like, they sold their house in LA and bought a lot of properties in Nebraska. So they were like set for life, right? Like, basically hit the lottery when they sold the house in LA.
Oh,
And they
nice.
bought a lot of property. So like they were set. So I was kind of just chilling on I kid you not, on my princess sheets, which I had never had before, in my sister's bedroom, just doing nothing for like a year, just like making friends, doing yoga, having some fun. And while I was there, I was only supposed to be there for 3 months because I was on my way to take a new contract that I had closed in New York. I had closed a contract in New York to help a huge corporation bring innovation within. Well, they lost all their funding. That department lost all their funding, and they're like, we're so sorry, Emmy. There's nothing we can do. Like, we have to rescind and we have to like void the contract. And I was like, okay.
Oh,
At
wow.
this point in my life, I had realized that God never closes the doors. He simply redirects.
That's
So I
crazy.
knew, okay, here I was trying to run away from Nebraska and just using it as a springboard. Let me kind of hang out and stay here longer.
Yep.
So while I was there, I started dating and I met the love of my life. And at this point, I still haven't transitioned. Okay. So I'm telling you this part because
wow.
I have not transitioned into like, oh, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. I'm
Mhm.
still in who knows what I'm going to do next, to be
Yeah.
honest. So I met my now husband. We started dating. We got engaged. And David, the day that I posted that we got engaged, I got all these secret messages from women from around the world saying, oh my God, Emmy, congratulations. Where did you meet him? Does he have a brother?
No way.
Where do yes. Can you clone him? How do we find more men like him? Yes. And at first I was like, oh, how cute, right? He, ha, ha. And then I was like, wait a second. Like, why am I getting so many of these messages from women who are extremely successful? Okay. Like I went to school with women, and my surroundings were all women executives who went to NYU, Berkeley, Stanford, Harvard, Brown. Like, these
Wow.
were not women who, for lack of a better term, they had incredible accomplishments and they had
Right.
incredible resumes like myself.
Right.
So I started realizing, like, okay, wow, like this is a major pain point for a lot of people, and it wasn't just me. So what I had been through in secret, in yearning and struggling, I realized other women executives were going through it in secret as well.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that's where the new true market opportunity popped up. And as soon as I got those messages, I knew I had to do something, because I realized what I loved about the coaching with the lean startups was actually mindset coaching. I love teaching them about mindset. I like the business logistics too, but that wasn't as fun to me. It was more teaching them that there's no such thing as them being failures. Just because this experiment failed, they as humans were not failures. And understanding that. So I realized that all the tools I learned of how to be a mindset coach now transferred exactly to the love stuff. And I also realized, David, because I am obsessed with patterns and creating strategies, I just created a methodology for calling in soulmate love.
Wow.
So not only could I do it for myself, now I had to prove I could do it for others.
Yeah.
So I went off to do that. And I created a 12-week program. where I had 20 women show up. They all had to pay $200 deposit. I just
Mhm.
posted something on Facebook. They
Yeah.
paid, and that launched my global career. So in less than 2 years, all organic. I still have yet to this day pay for Facebook ads. I'm going
Wow.
too soon, but all of that went from zero to $400,000 in revenue
Wow.
with no Facebook ads, no website,
Wow.
and no email list.
That is an amazing case study right there. What? Wait a minute. So obviously it was working. Your
Yes.
methodology was, because nobody comes back and nobody refers, and you don't, a business doesn't grow unless. So talk to us about what were some of the kind of results that were happening for these women that you're coaching. What was happening?
Yeah. So um, we started getting results pretty freaking fast. I had one of the ladies who went through a pretty intense session, and I helped her get through a PTSD situation. 2 months later, met the love of her life. She actually just had her baby.
Wow. Congrats.
A year later, I was able to help another client, and she is now married to her soulmate. I actually helped a gentleman, and he is now married, and they have, I think the baby's like 4 or 5 months old. So, like, the lives have been transformed. And to your point, the reason my business has grown and so successfully is because of referrals.
Mm,
So my clients, once they get the results, and here's the best part, David, is that most of my clients know and they understand that the transformation happens within them first, right? So by the time by the time God brings their person into their life, that
mm,
person is a cherry on top of their
mm,
already amazing life. I
mm.
teach them, how do you become the most radiant, the most magnetic, the highest, most beautiful version of yourself, and just
Mm,
live an incredible life first. And that's why actually my number one referrals are from clients who are actually in the middle of it, because they're like, you changed my life. I don't live with anxiety. I don't live with depression anymore. Like, I know that there's so much more than hope, because I tell my clients, you can have hope, but hope is not a strategy, or you need
mm.
to do more than just hope. So when they come to me, as when it comes to love, people are just supposed to just sort of like know it. And it's like,
Yeah.
how is that supposed to, like, that doesn't work that way. So
Mm,
I teach, there's three different major principles. I teach what I call the mindset. We all know what mindset is, the mindset of love, the heart set of love. Okay. So
mm.
there's a specific frequency and reprogramming that needs to happen. Just like we program ourselves around money, we have
Yes.
to do the same thing with love. And
Wow.
then the last one is skill set. Very few people actually work on the skill set of love, and that requires learning the art and science of communicating with a romantic partner.
Mm, wow, this is amazing. I just know I can just feel listeners would ask some of these questions that they want to ask, and one of the questions that I that comes to mind first is like, how did you learn, like, develop these methodologies, right? Like, because you're going, you yourself were looking, or love found you, or you love just happened in your life, and then you go from the need from your peers, friends, and people in this space, and like, that's bold, right, to like create a program, I imagine. So where did this stem from? Was this like, it stemmed out of your relationship, it stemmed out of your study, it stemmed out of all of it, your experience, and then now you got this formulaic process that's proven and generates results and brings people together. So where did that all stem from?
Yes, I love it, David. So very important. Love did not just happen to me. I
Mm,
didn't get married till I was 35, which, in my lineage of women, that's super, super, super duper old,
mhm,
because all of my aunts and grandmothers were married at like 15, 16, 17. They were babies. Okay. So at
mhm.
35, they're like, oh man, you're an old hag. But I mean, I still feel like I'm at the height of my life and my career, and just the love for my husband. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna go back, because I kind of skipped this part on purpose/accident, and I'm gonna say on purpose, because we were supposed to come back to this now. Is the formula that I came up with is iterations of different things that I tried. So I love didn't just happen upon me. You know, I there's only one thing I'm jealous of. It's the people who meet their soulmates when they're 18. And I'm like,
Mm,
oh, that's so cool. Like true, like partners in life. Like
yeah.
that was not what happened in my life.
Mm,
I actually had to work at this. So I had to work at unlearning a lot of things. So I
mm,
actually hired coaches when I was 25 years old, and I went through an intensive year long rewiring of what it meant for me to actually be in a healthy relationship with a man.
yeah.
Okay? Because guess what, David? I got really good at being the man.
Mm, mm,
And there's no way that I could be with a healthy man if I wanted to compete for being the man.
mm,
So I had to unlearn a
mm,
lot of things that were hurting me. And I also had to learn to trust myself. I had to learn to trust God. I had to rewire a lot of the pain that had happened. I had, and this happens for a lot of women. There's a lot of sexual assault that we have to go through. There's a lot of women are molested as children. I was by a family member, and at 22 I was kidnapped by a man for 2 years.
oh my God.
So yeah, like a lot of stuff happened, and I'm telling you all this while my career was still sort of like growing. And like, because of that man, I'm not going to go into the details. You're welcome to go listen in one of my episodes, because I don't want to make this episode about that.
Mhm.
um but just to give you an example of people who tear you down, this man made me turn down. I was given an opportunity to be an associate professor at a university,
That's huge.
at a community college. It wasn't a university, so I'll be clear about that. But it was still a big deal.
That's huge.
And this man made me turn it down because he didn't feel comfortable with the guy who interviewed me. Let's be clear, the only thing he didn't feel comfortable about was the fact that the other guy was a man, because
Wow.
there was zero disrespect, zero anything like that. This man was one of the most professional men I've ever met in my life, and this guy was so insecure, so jealous. I couldn't even go to a coffee shop and sit with myself. If I wanted to order a coffee, I would have to look down. If I ever dared to look at a man in their eyes, even to just order my coffee, that would turn into a 5-hour fight, because according to him, I was disrespecting our relationship.
Wow.
So I became a skeleton of a person for about 2.5 years, because I was believing all of this man's lies. I now know that this is narcissism, but
Yeah.
I didn't know it at the time. So there was a lot of unlearning and a lot of healing I had to do before I was able to call in my person. And executive women, I'm not going to say all, but a good 90% of us, we have what we call part personalities. And this is for all, it goes for all human beings. But
Mhm.
when we have conflicting belief systems, right? So we want a partner in life, we want an equal partner to be our king, and we want to be the queen. But the other part personality, we work so hard in our career that we don't want to then lose that level of independence, because we work so hard to get here. So
Right.
what I do is help them integrate that, and help them see that with the right partner and with the right strategy, they can have that co-creation and
Yeah.
don't have to give up a level of independence, but now recognize that they actually love being the little spoon. They love being feminine. They love that their partner wants to be a protector and provider, not
Right.
because she has to stop being financially independent, but now they can do everything they do is now magnified together. So there is no loss of anything.
That's beautiful. Because what you're teaching and the way you teach, um, I think there's a lot of movement, very extreme towards the other route of, and I remember something we were talking about that stuck out, and I would love for you to share this
Sure.
story, because I think there's a language to men and women to help make it a collaborative effort. And I think there's needs to be like an education, I think, both ways, where men really understand women and women really understand men. And you illustrated it perfectly. I think it was at the furniture store story. I think it was a bed. You guys were looking
Oh,
for, if you could share. I was just Like, wow, you caught it. I don't want to spoil it, but you
Yeah.
caught it. What was about to happen?
Thank you for bringing that up. I actually kind of forgot about those stories. That particular story. There's so many that I have. So thank you for reminding me of that one. So yeah, this was pretty recent. My husband and I just moved to a new city, so we went mattress shopping. We've made the mistake before of buying them on Amazon or online, and we're like, no, we really want to like feel it first before we purchase it. So we ended up walking into I believe this place was a actually I won't say the name of the company because it doesn't matter, right? So we went to a mattress place.
Right.
We went to a mattress place. And we walked in, and you need to understand that my husband is one of the most patient, the most kind. He's not sweet. You actually don't want sweet men. You want kind men. Okay,
Mhm.
kind men have a backbone and hold their boundaries. Very clear. We'll
Mhm.
come back to that another time.
Awesome.
Not sweetness, kind. He's very generous, very patient, and he's very respectful. Okay, that's a good premise to have.
Mm-hmm.
We walk into the store, and by this point, we had already been to like 3 other ones. So we had enough data to decide what it is that we wanted. And my husband walked in on a mission, right? And for those of you listening, I think men, you'll appreciate this. Like men's brain work on a mission, right? We're on a mission. So we're going to a mattress store. We're on a mission to purchase a mattress, right? He's
Right.
also on a mission to collect as much data as fast as possible to either make a decision if we need to leave or we need to get or we're going to purchase it here. Like that was the full purpose of that day. Very important. Okay. So we were not just browsing. So we walk in, and this wonderful woman who's doing her best to help says, hey, pick out a pillow because you're going to need that as we go check out the mattresses. And my husband says, oh, thank you so much. I don't think I'm going to need the pillow. Here's what we're looking for. This is our budget, and these are sort of like the areas that what we're looking at. And she says, no, no, no. You have to get a pillow from the wall because you're going to need it later. And my husband obliges. He's like, okay, a little bit irked of like, okay, well, don't tell the customer what they have to do, right? I don't want to
Right.
grab a pillow that 1,000 other people have touched, but okay.
Mm-hmm.
So we start laying on different mattresses, and the one that we were really liking they only happened to have a twin in the store at the moment, right? But we really liked the feel of that one. And he was laying down, and I know my husband, and I know how he processes, and I know what he was thinking in his mind. So he was laying down and moving from side to side and in different positions to sort of really test out the feel for this. And this this older lady, again trying to do her best, to do her sale,
Mm-hmm.
did something that really threw us both off, especially my husband. And she was like, oh, move over, you're not letting Emmy get in there, like, come on, don't be selfish. And she said it kind of in a joking way, but kind of like telling him that he was a jerk. And in my head, I knew exactly what she was doing, and she was treating him like her son.
Mm.
And in that moment, Matt sort of looked at me. He kind of smirked. I knew exactly what was going on. And I knew in that instant that even if we liked that mattress, she had lost that sale. Like we were done. We were out of there. And not only that, he wasn't disrespectful to her. He wasn't anything, but it was that irking of like, don't be so rude to me. And I actually told her, I was like, he's not in my way. He's processing, he's thinking, he's doing what he needs to do.
Mm-hmm.
I can lay with my husband when I choose. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it was this space of like, when we don't teach how the male and the female brain works, not only will we be in pain romantically, but in business as well. I see men and women in sales, when they don't understand the other point of view or the other brain, they will really, really hurt the sales prospect or cause more damage, especially in the coaching space.
Mm.
So this person lost our business. We went somewhere else where we were guided, especially towards what we needed and how our requests were being executed and our needs without them being imposed. And we walked out of there because we're like, well, we're not. She didn't know how to separate my husband from her son, and she was accidentally, it wasn't her intention, but she was severely emasculating him. And it has nothing to do with him not being able to be man enough. It has to do with like that was just really annoying and rude. Like, this is not how
Mm.
you do business. So we walked out. I don't know if I'm telling the story correctly and the points
Yeah.
you
Oh,
wanted,
oh,
David, but
yeah. No, those are all of the points. Like, I thought that's so profound. The reason why I think that's so profound, which I want to touch on two things that I would love for you to speak on. Like one, just the fact of the understanding of how to, because we were talking about this conversation because it's the importance of understanding if you're going to work together as a spouse or a husband and wife, or like you've got to understand the other person to be able to do it, because I know one of the things that you do is you work with couples that want to work together in business, and that's not only the one place. The other place is, like you were talking about, how to help maybe men sell to women or help women sell to men. Like, this applies in so many, obviously, relationships. So I would love for you to touch on two aspects. One, if you could dive into, like, I can just feel again questions that listeners would ask around, well, Emmy, what are some small tips, and obviously they can get more from your program, which we'll talk about. Um, what are some tips that I can, as I'm a high achieving woman listening to this, how can I find love like you did, or work on myself to attract love like you did? And then two, I'd love for you to talk to the couple nature of collaboration in organizations and business.
yes. So I'll speak to the first one first. So for those listening and are women executives and you're looking for love, there are a couple of things that you can do fairly quickly. So one of the important things of understanding, you can learn more about, like, in detail about the male and the female brain and scientifically how we're wired. But the number one thing that I see women make, and this is both in business and in relationships, is we'll ask a man a question, and before you answer, we'll ask you a second one, and before you answer, we'll ask you the third one. And that's because of how the female brain is wired. We tend to answer pretty quickly, and the male brain is wired to go on a mission, not only to hunt, but also to go on a mission to go find the answer inside their brain.
Mm,
And if a man is not responding to, so lesson number one, ladies, ask one question at a time.
mm,
One question at a time, as clear and as specific as possible. Okay.
mm,
And then here's the second part to that: stay quiet.
mm,
Stay quiet, because if the man respects you, he'll actually take a little bit to respond.
mm,
And in the female world, it's the opposite. The way women bond, we interrupt each other all the freaking time. We go to brunch, we're talking over each other. There's like 5 or 6 of us, and we know what's going on in everyone's lives, and we bond over chatter and over excitement and over cheering each other on, and like, oh my god, it's just so much fun. And we interrupt a lot, even in agreement. Even
mm,
in agreement. And the male brain gets distracted when you interrupt, even in agreement.
mm,
So I had to learn that sometimes, David, I literally bite my tongue. Not because my husband is saying something I don't want to hear. I'm so interested in what he's saying, but I have to stop myself from interrupting him from excitement.
mm,
So I will show him in my facial expressions and make sure that he finishes his thought in his sentence. And when
mm,
it's absolutely clear that he's done, then I will say and share. Because, or else the male brain thinks an interruption like that is a level of disrespect. Because
mm,
guess what? The male brain, the way it works is, it's like the train tracks. And once it gets derailed, it's really annoying and it takes a lot of effort to get back on that train track. The female brain, we get derailed 24/7. We were designed for derailment because
mm.
because we are designed for babies, and we're designed for all these other things, and we're designed for this miraculous way that how our brain works. So we can actually get back on track pretty quickly.
That's that explains so much. That is so deep. Sorry, keep going. I'm just like,
No, yeah, I actually want to hear
yeah.
what you're
So,
resonating with right
so,
now.
so, so that makes so much sense, right? I think about myself. I've been married now 12 years. I have an amazing wife, Abigail, and one of the things I would say is, like, when I'm processing or thinking about something, I just need like a moment to like get it, like, hey, what's going on, what's going on. She might ask, and I'm like, nothing's coming because I'm trying to process, and so that makes so much sense. Like, and she's eager, and I'm like not eager at times, and then the other side of it is just like, because I one of my favorite books about relationships is Love and Respect, and I don't know if you had a chance to read. Yeah, but that book talked about how we, as men, like treat respect is more important than love, and how for women love is more important than respect because we're naturally wired. So when you said that that derails us, and it's a form of disrespect, that's like the worst thing you can do to a man is disrespect. Like you can make fun of me, do different things, but if I feel disrespected, it's like it's hard to get back on track. And then you saying that women can kind of handle it, just it's so deep. Like you're sharing how we're wired on a deep level. It's not like we chose to be like we're wired like this. It's amazing.
Yeah. We're wired like that. And because we're not taught that, David, it creates this level of accidental pain and accidental suffering, right? So your wife wants to know about your day. And let's say
Mm-hmm.
you come home and she's like, oh, honey, how are you? Like, how'd it go? Da, 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 da. Asking you like maybe 5 or 6 questions at once, which is
Mm-hmm.
how the female brain operates.
Right.
And you're like, I need a minute, right? Like just right. So if you kind of like and you might not even be upset, you might not anything, you're
Mhm.
actually excited to see her, but you can't process it all at the same time. And
Right.
now she asked you one question and five, so you don't know if you're supposed to answer one, two, three, or five. And what was four? So you stay quiet and maybe you answer only two, but after like a minute or so, and then she's feeling hurt because she's like, oh, he ignored me. And you're
Mm,
like, but I didn't ignore you, right? So now she accidentally like bombarded you. It was
yeah.
not her intention, right? But if she understood that to give you a minute, so I'll tell you, like, tip for the ladies listening:
Mm-hmm.
when your man comes home, or when you come home, or where you're, like see each other for the first time after long time or throughout the day, make it a point to not have your first question be, "How was your day?"
Mm,
That's too, it might seem simple, but it's extensive because you and I know that you don't want to just hear good or bad.
right.
Okay. The real answer for it is much longer. So my rule for myself is, David, when I see
Mm,
my husband, is I give him a hug. We always reconnect with a big hug
mm.
and welcome home.
Oh wow, that's it's like affirming and wow.
Yeah. And nothing else. The questions can come later. Maybe 30, 45 minutes into us, maybe eating dinner. Maybe he needs a full hour shower before he can
Yeah.
come and really sit and connect with me. And
Wow.
I understand that if I can give him that space, we'll be more intimate as opposed to me needing those answers immediately.
Yeah. Wow. So I can just imagine, right? Everything you're sharing, that because you coach. I mean, I know you help couples, but I know your primary is helping women. I can imagine how many women unknowingly, not where do you learn this, right? You're not taught this in school. There's not a program to really show you all this stuff. So they go into the dating scene, and we already know that today, that at least in America, that women completely outnumber men, and there's slim pickings already, right? And so they come into the dating realm and you're doing some of these things unknowingly, unbeknownst, and you're really limiting opportunity. It sounds, is that accurate? Like, is that what's happening? Is like just just by not knowing, they could be missing opportunity.
They are, and it's unfortunate, but this is why I'm going into corporations as well to teach this, David. There are a lot of women who will actually not get board seats or not get promoted to leadership. There are a lot of elements here, by the way. Okay, so I'm not
Mhm.
just going to say this is the only thing, but
Yeah.
a lot of times, because we don't know this, we accidentally, even in interviews, we won't answer the question directly, because as women, if you ask me a question, my female brain needs to give you context. And
Mm.
most men will go like, just answer the freaking question.
Yes.
And so I teach the women to answer the question directly
Mm.
first, and then say, I need to give you some context, right? So not minimizing how our brain works, because it's our brains are marvelous, and
They are.
so are yours,
Mm.
okay? But when we understand this, we can work with our brains and also yours. So there's this level of beautiful respect that happens
Yeah.
when I recognize the way that you think is not wrong, the way that I think is not wrong, it's just different.
Mm.
And to be able to come together and collaborate in that instance works amazingly well. So I teach women how to interview properly, how to really bring things up in corporate boardrooms, how to present to men and women when people are focused on certain things, and the importance of bringing in context when it matters. Sometimes women bring up context too much, so it goes over people's heads. They
Mm.
start going like kind of like dozing off, not because they don't care, but the context, you're kind of like, what's the point of this story? and
Right.
and I learned most of these principles by Alison Armstrong. Shout out to Alison Armstrong, she's freaking amazing. She talks about men listen for what's the point, what's the problem,
Yes.
and women listen for bonding. So we want details. So when she asks you how was your day, you're like, oh, it was pretty good, and she's like, but what happened, right? Like, tell me
Right.
more. And you're like,
Right.
it was good. What else is there, right? So what my husband and I do is what we call ESPN highlights, right?
Mm.
I give him the highlights of my day, and he gives me the highlights of his. And
Mm.
then if there's any of those highlights that we want more details about, we ask for more. But we
Mm.
don't, I make it a point to not just bombard him with details upon details upon details,
Yeah.
because his brain is not designed for that. So I do that with my girlfriends. My girlfriends and
Mm.
I can talk for 5-6 hours straight about
Mm.
shenanigans, about random things, and somehow we know everything that's going on. But I will not torture my husband with that.
Mm. That's so powerful. So if you could speak on that, I mean, this is like a master class. I mean, they need. Man, I'm like, we need to have people get your invoice from what you're giving them today. Like, there's so much wisdom in here that you could that if they really understood and grab a hold of what you're sharing, they could transform their relationships. So if you could, and I want to also respect your time, but I'm like, I could speak to you for hours about this. So what about the couples, right? Because that's, I have friends, I have fellow entrepreneurs that have businesses together where they're married or been in long time relationships, and it's hard enough being in a relationship. There's a lot of work, um, but that's a whole nother dynamic when you got business involved too. So what is this dynamic that you teach about? If you could just break that down.
Yeah. So when it comes to power couples, it gets pretty interesting, right? Couples who work together. And by the way, power couples for me are people or spouses who have chosen to come together and co-create an empire. They don't necessarily need to be in the same company. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
My husband and I are a power couple. We are both at the top, at the peak of our games and how we operate. He's one of the top 1% of facilities directors in the world. And I am one of the top entrepreneurs in the world. Pretty freaking epic. He comes to my retreats as himself, and ladies get to ask him questions. I do not require for him to do any coaching. I do not require for him to show up on any podcast. I don't. Do I ask him for favors? Absolutely. And because he wants to be my hero, he shows up. And I appreciate him so much. And he loves it. He loves to be able to answer women's questions. But we are not in the same business together at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there are couples who are, and something that happens is it starts to become a little bit more difficult to separate the love identity from the business identity, right? So I'll tell you, is it okay if I tell you one of the mistakes at CA masterminds when couples are together? Okay, so one of the mistakes I see at masterminds when couples are together, again, these are accidental things. It's not intentional. You and I are part of the Russell Brunson world, and I see this happen, and I actually just saw it happen not that long ago.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a husband presenting on stage, and he said a comment, and it was something that the audience was like, hey, great job, like, woo. So when the clapping died down, the wife interrupted with a nugget. In her mind, though, it wasn't an interruption, it was her like bragging on her man.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, it was a brag on her man,
Mm-hmm.
but it derailed him
Mm.
because it took him away from what his plan was of what he was speaking on stage.
Mm.
So it took him a second to sort of like find his like footing again and come back. Was it that big of a deal? No. But this is what I mean around like sometimes as women, we love our partners so much that we interrupt on accident, even when we're being your cheerleaders.
Mm.
And this was an interruption out of love,
Yeah.
but it should have happened in private
Mm.
because it derailed him on stage, right? So, and the thing is, I wouldn't have liked that the other way around either. So it's not like only respect the male brain. Like, no, don't do it to us on stage either. Like, don't, it's not like, now go interrupt the woman. Like,
Yeah.
when we have a designated time and you know how short amount of time we have for masterminds,
Oh yes.
like don't interrupt in that space. So I have two major identities I work with. And this is the importance of recognizing who are you being right now. Okay. When I am the coach, when I am on these podcasts, when I am doing an intervention, when I am on stage, I am Athena. That's what I named myself. I am the goddess warrior Athena. Okay. She would walk around with a shield and a spear. She had a little owl, right? That we now know as the owl of wisdom, right? So it's just a cool sort of like hat that I get to put on. We're like, I'm Athena. And in my office, when that door is closed, I am in Athena mode. So my husband respects when I'm in Athena mode, right? And when he's in work mode, I respect that he's in work mode. He has his own identity, right? For what work mode is. When and this is a conscious choice, by the way, we have to switch. Allison calls it a spiritual costume change. When I am choosing to be feminine, to be receiving, to be the little spoon and basically be a big baby. I'm a big baby when it comes to women. I am so spoiled. Oh my goodness. I choose to be Aphrodite. And Aphrodite is the feminine, sensual, romantic one. She's the playful one. She's the one that comes out to play. She's the one that sends my husband funny gifs with little animals throughout the day. And we just laugh and laugh and laugh.
Right.
And I know that if my husband is busy at work, he tells me I'm allowed to text him 24/7. Do I? No, because I have a life too. But that does mean that when I need to get a hold of him or even just to say hello, I text him. And if I don't hear back from him for 5 or 6 hours, David, do you know what I do? It's been way too long at this point. I do absolutely nothing. Why? Because he's busy and so am I. Okay, he will get back to me when he's available, just like he respects my time and I get back to him when he's available. It is important to have those check-ins, but to not impose on each other's time. So what power couples really need to work on is how do they embody which identity? For me, it's Athena and Aphrodite. For you, you need to designate what those two, and it could be different identities that you take on, right? Or different hats and different roles, because we do that at work anyway. We wear different hats at different times. So why is it that we're always the same person with our partner? And that's not true, because you're not always the same person. Sometimes you're in dad mode. Sometimes you're in protector mode, right? And sometimes you're in playful mode, and sometimes you're in we want to be intimate, right? And when in order for a woman to feel safe to share intimacy, we'll call it, we need to be able to have emotional intimacy with our partners throughout the day and throughout the week. And that's one part of the male brain that isn't always lit up. Okay. The one part of the male brain that doesn't quite understand emotional intimacy and touch, you're not wired that way. So the male brain needs to understand that his wife, I don't care how much of an amazing, accomplished woman she is, she needs to hear every single day how much you love her, And
Mm,
not love you, babe. Love you, babe does not count.
mm,
I love you.
mm,
You're so beautiful.
mm.
When can I take you on a date? And yes, you can date your spouse.
Mm,
Do you want to go shopping for a dress?
mm,
How can you together as a couple, and how often are you touching your wife on her body
mhm,
that is a non-sexual touch? When
mm,
was the last time you kissed her hand? When was the
mm.
last time you kissed her forehead? When was the last time you kissed her cheek? When was the last time you put your hand on her heart
Wow.
and let your vibration as her man calm her entire nervous system? I'm getting goosebumps right now just talking
Wow.
about it. And
Like,
just let her cry into your arms while you hold her and keep her safe and protected. Because I need you to understand this one thing, men listening.
mm,
The female brain is paranoid. The female brain always has a big part of the chunk of our brain that is always lit up. I'm going to tell you which part it is because it
yeah.
does not operate in your brain the same way. I'm going
Mm,
to tell you why we're always exhausted. The female brain is always, always, always scanning for threats.
hmm.
We are technically the weaker species
Mm-hmm.
physically.
Physically, yeah.
We are always in a potential threat in any physical space. Once we leave our home, we are in danger.
Wow.
Yes, and men don't understand that. How could you? You're not taught that.
Mm,
So, because of that, the chances of us become overwhelmed are much higher and it happens at a much faster pace. The chances of us becoming irritable happen much
mm,
faster at a much higher pace because there's already this density of this energy of like, are we safe going from Target to the car? Are we safe going from office to the car? It depends on the time of day. And sometimes in the middle of the day, you still find crazy people.
that's
It is
true.
very rare in a man's life when you feel like your life is threatened. It does happen, but I can tell you for a fact, and with all the studies that have been shown, my friend, that for a woman, our life is threatened either every other day or every week.
Oh my God.
So we live with that, okay? Right now on TikTok, there's a whole trend going around like, would a woman rather be alone in the woods with a bear or with a man? Go watch it if you haven't and listen, truly listen to the stories that women are sharing and why we're sharing that because to a lot of men it sounds so ridiculous. And I can tell you my response, the only man, there's actually only two men that I would be okay with being in the woods with
Yeah.
that I know, my husband and my father individually, because my husband and my father are both incredible, amazing men.
Mm-hmm.
If it truly was between a bear and a random strange man that I do not know, I
Mm.
would pick the bear every single time.
Wow.
Yep.
This is like eye-opening stuff I've never even, like you said, even thought of. Like it, you've allowed me and the listeners, and especially the men, to see into the world and the mind of a woman and the very real dangers that you all face. And like it's crazy to think like we we don't even have that thought. Like it's not even what I'm even conscious of. Like I can't imagine having to live that way every day. And now as you tell me, I'm thinking about things my wife has said, maybe like, yeah, it was weird. This guy was around, or this is that, or when she used to take the train, she doesn't take the train anymore, thank God. But just stories of that. I'm recalling things as you're saying this, and I'm like, wow, this is profound information that can help a lot of men. And I'm also encouraged by what you shared. I know just as a man, just like I have a level of affection, right? But it's not a natural like every day I'm affectionate, and so you sharing the context. I think I'm a type of person that needs to know why. I just don't do something. I need to know why I should do something Obviously, I always like to show affection to my wife, but this gives me a deeper level of understanding why that affection should, obviously, it's needed regardless, but it's so this is helpful, and this is what I want to do. I mean, if you're okay with this, because like I said, I can speak to you about this for hours. I think we need to do a part two. I don't want to wrap up this episode.
I would love
like
to.
like literally as soon as we can. I think we need to go into part two, and because I want to give the proper justice of time to go into how you some stories, case studies, couples you've helped, women you've helped, how people can work with you and learn about your programs and learn about the things that you do. I also would love to talk about your love story as well. So there's so much that I feel like we didn't really get to dive into. How does that sound?
That sounds amazing. Happy to.
Wonderful. So, listeners, this is part one. We're going to have a part two very, very, very soon because I know you're eager just like I am.